So, the teleological argument tries to prove there's a cosmic designer. But here's the big question. Even if it succeeds, does it actually prove the existence of the god of classical theism?
Now, the god of classical theism isn't just some generic creator. It's a very specific philosophical and theological concept referring to a being with a very particular set of characteristics.
And this being is defined by some key attributes. You've got omnipotence, which means all-powerful, omniscience, or all-knowing, and omnibenevolence, which is all-loving or perfectly good. On top of that, this being is considered necessary, meaning its existence doesn't depend on anything else, and it's understood to be a single, unique being, which is, of course, the foundation of monotheism. So the argument flows from seeing order in the universe to inferring a designer. But the critical point we need to analyze is that unresolved gap between step 2 and step 4. That jump from a designer to the god of classical theism isn't obvious at all, and it needs a lot more justification. So now we're going to look at 4 distinct philosophical challenges that question this very leap in logic. They each target the assumptions you need to make to bridge that gap. The first challenge is this. Even if you think the teleological argument is sound, it actually tells us very little about the designer's nature. The evidence we find in the universe doesn't really force us to conclude that its creator must have unlimited attributes. Let's look at this comparison. On the left, we see what the argument's evidence actually supports, a designer with enough power and intelligence to make the universe we see. But on the right, you see what classical theism requires, a being with unlimited power, knowledge, and goodness. The argument just doesn't provide the evidence to get you from sufficiently powerful to all-powerful. Our second challenge, which was famously put forward by the philosopher David Hume, points out that the argument doesn't automatically lead to monotheism. The evidence could just as easily fit with the idea of multiple creators. Hume uses a pretty compelling analogy here. He says, look at complex things humans make, like a ship. It's usually the work of a whole team of designers and builders, right? So if we're arguing by analogy from human design to cosmic design, then shouldn't we think the universe, which is way more complex, was also made by a committee of gods? And that, of course, contradicts the single god requirement of monotheism. The third challenge makes a distinction between the act of creating something and the creator sticking around. The argument doesn't prove that the designer is still present or even active in the universe. And this is where we get the important distinction between theism and deism. Theism says God created the world and is still actively involved. Deism, on the other hand, suggests a creator made the universe with all its laws and then just left it alone. The teleological argument could totally support a deistic creator, which means it doesn't, by itself, get you to the active, involved God of classical theism. Okay, our fourth and final challenge is a big one, the problem of evil. This objection really digs in and asks how we can square all the imperfections and suffering in the world with a designer who's supposed to be all good and all-powerful. It really boils down to this question. If the designer is all-powerful and all good, then it would have both the ability and the desire to create a perfect world, right? So, the existence of widespread natural evils, things like diseases, earthquakes, and so on, seems to be evidence against the designer having those specific, perfect attributes. As this table lays out, the limited designer objection targets omnipotence and omniscience. The multiple designers objection goes after monotheism. The absent designer objection challenges the whole idea of active theism, suggesting deism instead. And finally, the problem of evil and suffering is a direct challenge to the attribute of omnibenevolence. What this all really shows is that even if you accept the teleological argument, you're still left with a huge logical and evidential gap.